Welcome back to Maryland Family Matters, the podcast of the Maryland Family Institute. We are joined today by Dr. Jenna Robinson, who is the president of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal in North Carolina. Dr. Robinson, welcome to Maryland Family Matters.
It's great to be here.
Dr. Robinson, I want to talk to you a little bit about this report that your organization has done on civic requirements for higher education and high school requirements across the states. But before we get to that, I want to ask you about your background. Where did you grow up? Um, uh, where are you now? And what brought you to lead the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal?
I grew up in Florida, but I moved to North Carolina in 1995. So I feel like a native North Carolinian now. I've been here ever since and love it. Um, and I came to work on higher education policy. It was a circuitous route. At first, I thought I wanted to go to law school, realized, that wasn't for me as I was doing my undergraduate work. And then I went to graduate school in political science. And while I was there, all of the work I was doing, I drifted closer and closer to public policy. And I realized, that really that was my interest, public policy rather than the theoretical political science. So as soon as I finished my PhD, actually before I even finished my PhD, I started working in a nonprofit and have stayed ever since.
And was that nonprofit on the state level there?
Yes, I worked at the John Locke Foundation, which is North Carolina's kind of all-inclusive public policy institute for free market policy, and then later started working at the Martin Center, and I've been at the Martin Center for almost 20 years now.
So you have an understanding of the importance of state policy. You know, a lot of folks who are interested in politics or public policy focus so much on the federal level, and that's important, clearly. But those of us who work in state politics understand this gift that our founders gave to us of federalism, right? And so we can make a real difference on the state level. Talk
Yeah,
a little bit about that?
absolutely. In fact, I think the state level is where most of the lasting change will be in higher education. Obviously, there's a lot of activity on the federal level right now, and I don't discount that. I think a lot of it's very important. But almost 80% of undergraduate students go to uh, public universities or public colleges.
Wow.
And so if you want to affect what students learn, public universities and public colleges are the place to act. And those are institutions that are created by the state. They're creatures of states, individual states. And so I agree 100% that changing policy at the state level or even at the institutional level is where we should be investing a lot of our time.
And it's really in that vein that you've published this study, a 50 state study that we want to talk about today about civics and higher education. Tell us about this study you conducted.
Absolutely. So it's called 50 States Civics Comparison of, and on civics education. And we were just interested to see state by state what is required, because we know, I think all of us know, that the state of civic knowledge in this nation is not what it should be. Too many students can't identify the three branches of government, can't identify the father of the Constitution, and certainly don't get into deeper issues like federalism, like why do we have an electoral college? Um, why do we have the Senate and the House set up as a bicameral legislature the way we do? And so I think that our concern was, well, how do we ensure that students and citizens have the information they need? And so we looked state by state to see what was required, and we looked both at high schools, what is required in high schools, and what is required in public universities, but we also looked at what is required for future social studies teachers to teach. Because I think that's so important, because those are the people who are going to teach the required civics courses in our high schools. And if they don't have a solid grounding in that information themselves, then the requirement in high school becomes far less meaningful.
All of those issues are critical for those of us, well, for all Americans, of course, but particularly those of us here in Maryland. I'm sitting in Annapolis, which is our state capital, just a few blocks from the State House in Maryland, where one of the wonderful acts of all of Western civilization happened. This is where Washington resigned his commission before the Continental Congress after he won the Revolution. And he went back to being a farmer, an amazing thing. Four of the original signers of the U.S. Constitution were here from Annapolis. So all of this stuff is really relevant to the history of where I'm sitting. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Before I do, share with us the broader national finding you have from your study of civics.
Absolutely. So our national findings were mixed. We found that most states do require a civics course for high school graduation. And so that's very encouraging. There are only a very few outliers in that area. But only 14 states require civics courses for all undergraduate students. And so there's a lot more work to be done in our public colleges and universities. In the teacher space, it's mixed. So we looked both at whether students had to take a introduction to American government course and whether they had to take a U.S. history course.
Okay.
And we really should have looked to see if they have to take 2 U.S. history courses, because what most universities do is that they break U.S. history into 2 parts. U.S. history up until 1865 and U.S. history post 1865. And you
Right.
really need all of it to understand American civics and
Right.
American history well. And so we didn't go into that level of granularity. We just looked at, do they require American history? And so some of them require both, which is wonderful to see. But many of them require just one or the other.
So both American history, and then also
And American government or American politics. It's called different things in different places, but it's that basic, introduction to American government class where you learn about the 3 branches, you learn about the Constitution, the Declaration, you learn about, how the relationship between states and the nation. So that's the basic course. I'm sure you took it during your own time in college.
And the American history, even if a state system would require that, you're saying oftentimes they require one American history course, and
Right.
and oftentimes universities divide that up using the Civil War as the dividing line.
Mm-hmm.
You're either taking the first
It's
one or the
very
second one.
typical to have,
Yeah.
there's U.S. history 1, U.S. history 2, and we don't often see a college or university require both.
Right, right. So you said there are 14 states that require this. Let me ask a question that I'm sure most of our listeners already know the answer to, but I will ask you as the expert. Is Maryland one of those?
No. Maryland
Yeah.
is not one of the states that requires all undergraduates to take a civics course for graduation, sadly.
And so, despite our own wonderful history, over my shoulder here, you'll see our logo with 7 stars. We have that there for a number of reasons. One of which is that Maryland was the 7th state to ratify the U.S. Constitution when we got started. Despite our glorious history here in Maryland, despite how relevant this is to all of us, we don't require the study of both American history and American government in our institutions of higher education. So the state is dire. Only 14 states do. Dr. Robinson, tell us a little bit about the solution. What is the solution to this in your view?
Well, the solution is either for the Maryland legislature or the Maryland university system to change the general education requirements for Maryland public universities to include a civics course. And right now, I took a closer look at the University of Maryland at College Park's general education requirements, because of course that's your flagship. And there is certainly room for a civics course. Right now, University of Maryland College Park just has distribution requirements like so many other universities, and they have to take 6 credits in history and social science and 4 to 6 credits in diversity. So my solution would be one less diversity course and add that civics course for everybody. Because those history and social science courses right now, they're just a smorgasbord. There's a huge list that students can choose from. They might take the entry American politics course, but that they might take something that is completely disconnected from our American traditions. They have, like I said, a huge list to choose from.
Yeah, it's that cafeteria approach
Absolutely.
that puts the student in the driver's seat, which is oftentimes fine for motivation, but
Mm-hmm.
students are students for a reason. They're students because they don't know as much as their professors do. It's just like the reason why I don't run a restaurant. I don't have those gifts, and so when I go into a restaurant, I'm trusting the chef to prepare for us the food that he or she, by their training, knows is good for us, and
Mm-hmm.
rather than giving that choice to
Yeah,
us. And so,
absolutely. And I mean, the choices really are overwhelming. It's a huge list, and it apparently changes from semester to semester based on what's available. And so, if you're confronted with this choice as an undergraduate student, it's very easy just to take whatever fits your schedule, or maybe the professor gives easy A's
right.
instead of choosing something that's going to be good for your formation.
And what is required of students, it's not just sort of hoops you have to jump through. This is what our society, our culture tells us is important, tells us
Right.
what we value. And so if we don't require an American history or American government course, we're saying that those things fundamentally don't matter.
Mhm.
Um, and that's a problem.
Absolutely. Right now, the University of Maryland College Park is telling students, we think history generally is something you should know a little about, but we are completely ambivalent about what type of history you learn.
So you talked about the Maryland legislature taking action, or the Maryland Commission on Higher Education changing requirements. Let me ask you a question that those of us who are in blue states face. How do you convince states like Maryland that are sort of dominated by sort of one party and one ideology that they should do this? And then the follow-up question is with regard to critical theory. The state legislature could mandate this, but as we know from the experience of so many other institutions of particularly public higher education, um, you can say that you offer an American history course,
Mhm.
but it might be a critical look at American history,
Right. Right.
not a course that focuses on our positive, but
Mhm.
focuses on all these isms, racism, colonialism, sexism, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
How do you guard against those things?
Right. So I think I'll take on the first question first.
Yeah.
And I think that, really civic knowledge is a bipartisan issue.
Mhm.
And especially right now, America's 250th anniversary, I think there is a lot of traction for ensuring that everyone has
Yeah.
a solid background in America's history, in America's government. And I think you can tell people who are on the left side of the aisle that knowledge is important for engagement. We know that people on the right and the left both care about engagement. They care that young people go to vote. They care that young people are not going to be disengaged and apathetic about the political process. And I think we see a lot of that right now. That young people feel like they're powerless, and they have no interest really in uh, in our traditions and in our institutions. There's not a lot of trust in institutions right now. And so if
Right.
you do want to increase trust in institutions, engagement in the political process, then giving students knowledge empowers them to do that. And I think that that's a message that resonates with people regardless of their politics. Your second question about critical theory, my answer to that is to focus on primary documents.
Hmm.
Obviously anything can be twisted, but
Sure.
if you read the Declaration of Independence, if you read the Constitution, if you read the Gettysburg Address. And if you're spending your time doing those things, that's less time for interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah.
My concern really is, do they know the basics? Have they read the part of the Constitution where they lay out the powers of the different branches of government? Um, and if you, like I said, if you focus on those primary documents, even the Federalist Papers, Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, I mean, there is just a richness of primary documents. I think that is the best way to do it, because anytime you pick up a textbook, choose a textbook, it's going to have an angle. But those primary documents, you're getting American history and American civics from the horse's mouth. And I think that's the best way to go about it.
And I love how you say that. And as you read those primary documents, you get a sense of American ideals. What are the principles, the values that undergird those founding documents? And as you learn them, I would argue you are able to handle those times in American history, and there are many, where we didn't get it right, where we have flaws. I mean, look, slavery was a problem, a huge problem, that that has still suffering the effects today. How do you know that that is wrong? Well, one of the ways you know is by reading our founding documents, reading that all men are created equal, right? Equal justice before the law. This is you don't know that to be true if you don't read those founding documents. And so I would argue that this is how we actually fight some of the things that
Yeah,
critical.
absolutely. And I mean, and you can see the through line from the Declaration of Independence to the Gettysburg Address, saying that, America was an unfinished project.
Right.
And that's what the Civil War was about. That is why we are now having these, Reconstruction amendments. And so if you're reading American history and following American history through those primary documents, you do get a very strong sense of those values and ideals and how they have guided us all along.
That's exactly right. Dr. Robinson, how can people access this report if they want it, and how can they follow the Martin Center's work as they want to follow that?
Absolutely. So if people want to find this report, they can go to jamesgmartin.center and click on the advocacy tab. And also on jamesgmartin.center, you can sign up for our newsletters, and you can also find us on social media.
Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for joining us on Maryland Family Matters. We're so grateful for your work and calling your listeners and now our listeners to the importance of the founding, the great gift that we have been given by our founding fathers. Thank you for being on Maryland Family Matters today.
Thank you. It's been delightful.